Welcome to the third episode of Discography Discussion, where we take a deep dive into the studio albums of certain artists, groups, or bands. And today we're going to be looking at Daft Punk, a group of French electronica artists that made it really big in the early 90s and have continued to grow up until today. Um, this will be a rather short episode if I don't at least try my hardest to elongate it, so today we're going to be talking a little more about the album art for some of the albums, since there's only four of them, and just kind of uh, giving a couple of anecdotes, at least with one album, and how it connects to me. But yeah, let's get started with the first album. Homework. The first album was released in 1997, a total of 16 tracks at an hour and 13 minutes. While technically not their longest album, it's only beat by 1 minute, so to be completely honest, it is a pretty long album. And honestly, this trend kind of follows through, except for maybe one album. All their albums are really long, and they definitely feel longer, uh, especially when you keep listening to them. But talk about the album art really quickly. I love this album art. On the one hand, it just sort of looks like a silk blanket and then Daft Punk on it. But I've always seen it in my mind as like one of those really cool looking 80s jackets, and right on the back it just says Daft Punk, and it's a cool patch. And that's what I like about this album art. But I don't know. I like the sort of like stitched uh, work to it, like as if it is like a patch, an iron-on patch, or one you would sew on, with the lettering of Daft and Punk, and even the outline gold border, and complementary colors as well, being red, gold, and black, all very nice colors that fit together. Um, but not my favorite album, but not one I don't dislike either. It's just an okay album. It's their first studio album, so it's definitely a little more reliant on industrial sound and electronica as opposed to some of their later ones, which are more so funk influenced, and as well as having some rock theme in it, some rock and roll. Uh, but definitely there is still a little bit of that funk aspect every once in a while from a couple of the songs. There's a couple weird like transitionary songs that are only about maybe 10 seconds long or 15 seconds, but they count as tracks, of course. But um, they're really kind of nothing. They're just meant to move on to the next song. But like I said, though, a pretty okay album. I'm pretty indifferent about it. I like some of the songs. I don't like all of the songs. Um, as with every Daft Punk album, though, comes some sort of hit song, and from here we have two of their biggest, I would say, Defunk and Around the World. Both songs that I loved as a kid, and both which had music videos that I watched endlessly, especially Around the World, because my god, the dance sequence is amazing. But regardless, definitely a little weirder because of how old it is. And like I said, there were a couple of, rather, I didn't get to mention, there's a couple of LPs and EPs that also came out a little before and as well as in between each of these albums, um, that, of course, I didn't listen to, but they definitely have some sort of influences to seeing their transition into different styles. And definitely you can see how they started out with their roots and kind of kept with it. Um, a lot of weirder vocals from the one of the members. I don't remember which one, but I believe it's Bangalter. And basically, he was like, I wanted to learn English and give a couple little lyrics and vocals here to sample throughout our songs, and you can definitely hear a couple of them. The one with the most prominent lyrics and with different lyrics at all is Teachers, I believe is what it's called, or Teacher, I think, where it just basically lifts off all of the um, influences for both of them and to how they make their music. But like I said, an okay album, but moving on. Discovery, my absolute favorite album. Came out in 2001, has a total of 14 tracks and 1 hour and 1 minute total. Um, there's not a song on this album that I don't either know or love. I think the only one that I would say I sort of dislike is the final song on the album, the closer, which is called Too Long, and that's pretty much the only uh, complaint I have about that song is that it is too long. It's 10 minutes and it's just kind of repeating instrumentals, but whatever. Um, Personally, my favorite because it's the most of their blending of industrial, rock, and funk influence all in one. And as well, it has some really nice lyrics from, I believe, like I said, Bangalter, but I could be wrong. It might be Guy Manuel. He's the other member. Um, I don't know which one it is, but the reason I love this album the most, though, is because of the movie. If you didn't know, there was a movie that came out with it. I think either at the same time, like the same year, or if not the following year. It was called Interstellar 5555, and it has some other words too, but they're just way too. It's just way too long of a title. Just call it that. It was some weird anime movie. You can definitely see clips of it if you've heard any of the songs on this album, which you definitely have because you've got Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, One More Time, and my personal favorite, Aerodynamic. Um, they all, if you look them up, just their base music videos have the clip of the animation, and that's basically what the movie is just fitting the songs to a story loosely, I would say, but it does it relatively well. It probably doesn't hold up because I haven't seen it since I was like, I want to say like 13, maybe 12, maybe even a little bit younger than that, but um, yeah. And to talk about the album art a little bit, I absolutely just love this album art. It reminds me of like liquid metal, just like bam, just like slammed on the table, and it's got this cool like rainbow drop effect or shadow. And one of the things that I didn't really notice until I was getting the picture is um, some of the letters look like they're outward facing and like they're bubbling up, whereas others look like they're inward. Um, so like the T and the K look like they're going into the picture, whereas the P, the D, and the A and the U look like they're coming out. And I would even say maybe the N. Um, that's always just weirded me out when I've looked at this album art, but I like it. But yeah, favorite album, so there's nothing really else to talk about. Obviously, extremely biased, so let's move on. Human After All, which came out in 2005, a total of 10 tracks and only 45 minutes, being their shortest album, both track wise and just general runtime and length wise. Again, just another album that I'm kind of indifferent on, although I would maybe put this a little above Homework, but definitely not above Discovery. Um, Again, going back to some of their more industrial electronica fusions, as opposed to where Discovery is just kind of everything at once, this one just kind of dismisses some of the funk aspects in most of the songs. You can hear it every here and there with like um, robot rock and such, but never really a mainstay of the whole album or the style of the album. Um, Again, another couple of hit songs being Crescendos and Technologic and Robot Rock, like I said. And I also believe um, Short Circuit, and I think that's it that I can name off the top of my head, mind you. Um, but again, I really like this album though. I would definitely put it a little above Homework, only because Homework only really has like maybe 3 or 4 out of the whole 16 tracks that I really, really like and can listen to over and over again. But Human After All definitely has a lot more of a hit with me, at least in the track, like in the ratio of songs I don't like to I do like. I would say like it's maybe like 4-1, you know. But this is where I ran into sort of a problem, and it was kind of the beginning, the end of Discovery and the beginning of this is sort of the reason why I find out or why I find maybe most people don't like Daft Punk is because there's a lot of repeating um, vocals and electronics and instrumentals that definitely a lot of people don't like. And I can definitely understand it because it can get really, really repetitive and definitely when it's in places where it just feels like you've been listening to it for like 4 3 4 minutes and you're like, oh, I just want it to end. And then you find out the song is 5 minutes long and it just continues to get worse and worse. But um, definitely not too big of a problem in Discovery, at least not until the end. Or if you have a problem with One More Time, I would say maybe that's the most like um, offender, I guess, in this case. Human After All maybe has a couple more tracks where it starts to get a little tiring and such, but definitely not as much as the next track, or next album, Random Access Memories. And can I say really quickly, I actually love the name of this album. Um, Obviously, the letters being RAM and then Random Access Memory. You know, just kind of fitting in with their how they're robots or whatever. And I love the album art as well. While the other three definitely follow a trend of just showing the Daft Punk logo and everything else, I can definitely see them moving into a different style because when you think about it, the Daft Punk logo, as cool as it is, it's a little dated and kind of sticking with the early 90s and 2000s vibe, and doesn't really move on too well in the modern day. Although maybe you could argue that it does now because of the whole kick with the 80s and 90s coming back, but um, I don't know. I definitely like this shift here, and I also love this the composition of this album being um, the mask on the left side is going horizontal, and immediately it meets in the center of the album art and going vertical, so your eye automatically starts to go up. And gladly, the mask on the right side is also going vertically up, and it just is a really nice little sense of art, I guess, if you know what I mean. But anyway, Random Access Memories came out in 2013. When I found that out, I felt old because I remember when the album came out and I was excited, and now that was 5 years ago. Yeah. 13 tracks in total, an hour and 14 minutes, so being their longest album. But like I said, only a minute longer than Homework. So is it really the longest? Can you really argue that? It doesn't really matter, it's just too long. Um, Not, I would actually say my least favorite album. Definitely borrowing a lot more from a softer electronica and a funk influence is just way more heavy than it was in the other three combined, I would even say. Um, it's an okay album. There's a couple songs on here that I like, of course, but to be completely honest, all of those songs are the songs that I heard when they were released as singles, like Get Lucky and I believe it's Instant Love or something like that, with the song with Julian Casablancas. Um, but overall, not my favorite album, mostly because there's a track about some guy's life while some Daft Punk instrumentals are going on in the background, and it's like a 6 or 8 minute song about his whole life and him talking about it, and it's just kind of like I don't understand, and I don't think I ever really will understand it, but whatever. Um, Definitely seemed to be a big hit with people when it came out, and definitely a favorite for some people. But personally, I could skip this album if I were listening to all of them again. And to be completely honest, I could skip all of them except Discovery. But if I had to not listen to one again, I think Random Access Memories would be my vote. Too many weird vocals that I just kind of don't get, and all the instrumentals are very nice, especially um, when you do hear real instruments like an actual guitar being used um, and such, which has never been a thing that Daft Punk wasn't known for. They do know how to play real instruments, but personally, I prefer them doing more electronic instrument sounds and manipulating it more as opposed to here where they're actually there. Just in the sense that Daft Punk's style fits a little more with a reproduced and sort of artificial sound as opposed to something real. At least without blending it well. It just doesn't feel right, I guess. But it's, like I said, it's an okay album. While definitely not my favorite, if it is your favorite, I can understand. But again, it has sort of that problem of the repetition thing, but in a weird way where it's not repetitive, but more so just droning and boring and just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm tired of the song, I want to skip it, but whatever. Um, but that's pretty much all my thoughts about Random Access Memory, so I'd like to move into final thoughts, if you will. The final thoughts are it's Daft Punk. Um, I'm actually kind of disappointed in sort of myself that I could only listen to the studio albums, and I know that's not necessarily just like a like I know no one's physically stopping me or personally stopping me from listening to their LPs or EPs, but the show is based on their studio albums, so I don't want to cheat and listen to other things. And I'm definitely uh, sad about that because I know a lot of their LPs and EPs are really memorable, um, considering even their Alive album, which came out in 2007, their live concert being recorded for a CD. Typically, I'm not a fan of live albums at all, or even just live recordings. I'm not a fan of ever, but man, Daft Punk has some really good live albums, and I'm disappointed that, or sad that I didn't really get to listen to them. But maybe one day we'll come back and do like a bonus sort of video of me listening to that and talking about those as well. And another album I didn't get to listen to that I would have loved to would have been the Tron Legacy um, motion picture soundtrack because I love that movie. I love both Tron movies, but that movie specifically because Daft Punk's music is just made way better. And I definitely would have liked to listen to it, but we'll live another day and we'll eventually get to it at some point when I run out of artists, which kind of sounds impossible, but I don't think it is. And yeah, only other thing I really wanted to talk about was a little bit of a story that happened with Random Access Memories release, which was, I believe, in the month or two after its release, Daft Punk wanted to go on a live tour, and basically all of the fandom and just general fans and casual fans, I should say, were super excited because when Daft Punk tours, it's very rare and it's very well done. It's always a really nice show, whether it be visually or even just if you're listening to their music. It's just amazing, their live shows, and they didn't get to do that with Random Access Memories because of um, companies like Ticketmaster and even the owners of whatever venues they were going to, whether it be a stadium or even just a general like um, music center or performance and entertainment center. They basically stopped Daft Punk from doing those live shows for Random Access Memories, and a lot of people were disappointed, and the ones who took it the worst were Daft Punk as well, because they've sort of gone into what I would call a sort of seclusion. I mean, 5 years later, we still haven't heard an album. I'll say 4 years because we did just start 2018, of course, but 4 years later, we still haven't heard an album, which is a huge hiatus. And I know the time between Random Access Memories and Human After All was pretty long, but even this is still a little crazy. They don't really do too many live shows anymore. Um, just a couple like surprise appearances here and there. Like I think the most recent one I saw was in New York City where they did a pop up show, and that's pretty much been it for their live scene, which is a horrible thing because Daft Punk is amazing live and it just sucks. And as far as music wise, like I said, they haven't really made anything new aside from a couple of collaborations with um, The Weeknd and that song Starboy, which I'm not even gonna lie, I didn't like that song. Um, but I just am hopeful that in the future we'll see more Daft Punk because they've always been a thing I've loved since I was a kid, and I still love them now to an extent. I mean, I've probably listened to more of their songs than I've listened to more than most artists, and it's just kind of sad to not hear about them doing anything anymore. And yeah, sorry to end it on sort of a negative note, but thank you for watching. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. If there's anything I can improve, leave that down in the comments below. Links are all in the description. Link for my Twitter, so if there's any updates on the show or if a new episode comes out, it'll be definitely pinned to the top, so you don't have to follow, but feel free to. Um, and also, if there's any artist, group, or band that you'd like me to listen to, I'm definitely open to some suggestions. I'd like to hear what you would like me to hear. It's definitely fun. Um, yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.